2000. The world rings in the new millennium. America saw the biggest cliffhanger of a presidential election in its history. 6-year-old Elian Gonzalez became the centerpiece of international conflict. The world gathers in Sydney for the Summer Olympics. The USS Cole is damaged by suicide bombers off the coast of Yemen. Millions of dreams are crushed as the dot-com bubble bursts. The Yankees complete a three-peat. The Lakers start a dynasty of their own. The Rams win their first Super Bowl by mere inches. And the New Jersey Devils took the cup. Survivor kicked off its epic run. American Beauty takes Best Picture. Santana and Rob Thomas win Song of the Year with Smooth. And Blockbuster turns down a chance to buy Netflix for just $50 million. Ouch. 2000 was also an amazing year for theme parks, with every company trying to outdo each other in the industry with the most, with the biggest, with the fastest, with the most innovative. The coaster war was raging on, and enthusiasts around the world were enjoying the ride. These are the top 10 events from the year 2000 that changed the industry. '" 2000 had a lot of important events, but some not so much. Here are the honorable mentions. And now for the top 10. March 4th, 2000. During Coaster Bash at Kennywood, park officials announced that the Steel Phantom would be closing at the end of the season. The coaster fans in attendance were shocked, and the park cited lack of ridership and lack of expansion space as the main reasons to close it. Steel Phantom opened just 9 years earlier as the world's tallest and fastest coaster, but it didn't have a traditional hypercoaster layout. The first drop wasn't even as tall as the second one, as it dropped its riders into a ravine. And then the second half of the ride featured 4 inversions. The park stated its intentions to replace Steel Phantom the following year. August 10th, 2000. Kennywood announces that Steel Phantom won't actually be leaving. It'll just be modified, and the task would be given to D.H. Morgan. The coaster would feature the same station, lift, first drop, and second drop into the ravine. But after that, it would be transformed into a more traditional hypercoaster. The big drop into the ravine was even extended to 230 feet, and the inversions would be replaced with airtime hills. The aerodynamics chassis would remain, but Morgan would design a fiberglass body and lap bars for the coaster's new trains. It would be known as Phantom's Revenge, a bizarre project to turn one coaster into something else that would end up being a world-class coaster that holds up to this day. It's unclear if this conversion was always Kennywood's intention, or if they sought out this option after the backlash they got after their announcement to close it back in March. But regardless, they made the right choice, and this type of conversion was the precursor to what RMC would make their name on a decade later. Holiday World opened in 1946 as Santa Claus Land, which was logical as it was set in Santa Claus, Indiana. Indiana native Lewis Koch was entering retirement and wanted to do something nice for the kids rolling through the town of Santa Claus and finding that Santa Claus didn't actually live there. It started as a small park where kids could see Santa. This was free, but the park made its money from the toy shop and the restaurant, as well as some kids' rides. The park would grow from there. In the 70s, the focus shifted from kids to families, and even larger rides were built. In 1984, the park went from Santa Claus Land to Holiday World, and they added a Halloween and a 4th of July section. Their water park, Splashin' Safari, opened in 1993, and then they added their first major roller coaster in 1995 with the Raven. The wheels of expansion were in motion, but it really hit its stride in 2000. The park would open yet another major wooden coaster in the Legend, taller, faster, and longer than its neighbor, the Raven, and it was themed to the Headless Horseman chasing riders through the woods. Little Santa Claus Land now had 2 world-class wooden coasters and was smashing attendance records on a weekly basis. setting a one-day record of over 15,000 and a weekly record of over 57,000 in August. They needed to expand their operations, and in November of 2000, they announced a $1.6 million project to expand their admissions area, capacity on their rides, restrooms, queue space, trash cans, restaurant infrastructure, rental RVs, and more. But I'm forgetting the most important thing. 2000 was the first year that Holiday World offered free drinks, one of the most popular promotions in any park to this day. Their attendance of a little more than 500,000 in 1999 would increase to top 1 million by 2006, and 2000 was when they really ramped up this expansion. New Orleans is known for being a party town, as well as a major American city, but it was grossly underserved by the theme park industry. In the mid-90s, a plan was in the works to change that. May 20th, 2000. After 18 months of construction, Jazzland opens to the public. 140 acres, 30 rides, and 6 theme sections: Jazz Plaza, Cajun Country, Pontchartrain Beach, Mardi Gras, Kids Carnival, and Good Time Gardens. It would open its gates with 3 roller coasters, with the 4th one to open a few weeks later, with the standout being Mega Zeph, a CCI wooden coaster with a steel support structure to protect against termites, and more importantly, hurricane force winds. Jazzland sat near the shores of Lake Pontchartrain, right by the intersection of Interstates 10 and 510, and was equipped with drainage pipes in case the lake should flood. Six Flags would acquire the lease to the park in 2002 and rename it Six Flags New Orleans for the 2003 season, but Hurricane Katrina damaged the park beyond repair in 2005. The drainage pipes were not sufficient to deal with the water that was dumped onto the park. This deal would hurt Six Flags' bottom line at a time that they could not afford it, and this would be the last attempt to put a theme park in New Orleans. The best place to ride coasters in Louisiana is up the road in Baton Rouge, at Blue Bayou Dixie-Landon, a much safer location away from the Gulf Coast. It's a tough call for any investor to want to build a park in a city that's below sea level and prone to hurricanes. April 1st, 1998. Premier Parks acquires Six Flags theme parks from Time Warner for $1.86 billion. They used that Six Flags name on some of their smaller parks to boost their profile, like Marine World, Kentucky Kingdom, Elitch Gardens, and Darien Lake, as well as Six Flags America. But on July 5th, 2000, Premier went ahead and officially changed its corporate name to Six Flags. To understand the move, you have to understand the context of the time. Six Flags was in the middle of a major push to flood their parks with the biggest and best thrill rides. Nowadays, Six Flags is known for their small budget coasters and flat rides, but back then, they were adding 200-foot B&Ms and Intamins, or coasters with 7 inversions, and the brand name was very strong. Studies showed that the Six Flags brand ranked first among teenagers, over other brands like Nike, McDonald's, Disney, MTV, and Nintendo. The parks that had been rebranded as Six Flags saw a 21% increase in attendance and a 31% increase in revenues, though the new additions probably had a lot to do with that also. Even though it was just a name, this indicated the confidence of the brand going into the new millennium, driven by their influx of new additions. And there were no greater beneficiaries than the parks that make up the next 2 spots on this list. In 1971, a park opened up in the Netherlands called Flevohof. This was an educational park that taught kids about farming, but the Walibi Group came in 1993 to turn it into an amusement park. This attracted Premier Parks, which acquired it from Walibi in 1998, and then transformed into Six Flags Holland in 2000. At the time of the sale, the park had 1 thrill coaster and 1 family coaster, a Vekoma SLC called El Condor, and a Zero Tivoli called Keverbahn. Six Flags would transform this park over the course of not 2, not 3, not 4, but 1 year. With the snap of a finger and tens of millions of dollars, Six Flags Holland suddenly had 6 coasters. In addition to the 2 they already had, they would receive Flying Dutch Goldmine, a Mock Rides Wild Mouse, Robin Hood, a Vekoma wooden coaster, Superman the Ride, a Vekoma launched looping coaster, and La Via Volta, a Vekoma boomerang. With all of the new properties that Premier had brought on board in the late 90s, along with the pride of the Six Flags brand, They were not afraid to take major strides to turn a small park into a big one. This business strategy would backfire, and they had to sell Six Flags Holland along with most of their other European parks in 2004. But 2000 was a transformative year for the park that now goes by the name Walibi Holland. Their Wild Mouse was moved to another park, but the other 3 coasters are still going strong. They just look a little different than before. Superman the Ride is now called Express Platform 13. La Via Volta is now called Speed of Sound, and it features new trains, a tunnel on the first lift, and on-ride sound. Finally, Robin Hood closed down in 2018, but its structure is now being used for the RMC iBox Hybrid Untamed, holding the hybrid record for having 5 inversions. The story of Six Flags Ohio practically parallels that of Six Flags Holland. But unlike Holland, the park that was formerly known as Geauga Lake had a nice collection of coasters. A pair of wooden coasters along with an aero looper prior to Premier's acquisition of the park in 1995. And then they put in the Boomerang and the SLC in the years leading up to 2000. May 5th, 2000. The newly rebranded Six Flags Ohio opens its gates with 4 new coasters, starting with a Zero Tivoli family coaster called Roadrunner Express. There was also an intimate impulse coaster called Superman Ultimate Escape, and a CCI wooden hybrid coaster called The Villain. Finally, the biggest and most expensive of them all was the B&M floorless coaster, Batman Night Flight. It was clear that Six Flags wanted the rebranding of this park to coincide with this influx of coasters, and even though they had a strong collection to begin with, they had very stiff competition within their state, especially in the year 2000, so they felt like they had to go big or go home. The investments would prove to be an initial success, but with the acquisition of the adjacent SeaWorld park the year after, the park was set on a course of disaster. But there are other videos out there that cover that story. Check them out. I heard they're pretty good. For a long time, roller coasters were pretty basic. The car sat on top of the track. Eventually, these cars would go upside down. But it wasn't until 1981 that we saw the first modern attempts at a suspended coaster, and 1992 that we saw a coaster hanging under the track go upside down. But what about a coaster that simulates flying? There were a few small attempts at this back in the late 90s, featuring single-person cars. But Vekoma took the first legitimate crack at making the flying experience mainstream. April 1st, 2000. Stealth is introduced to Paramount's Great America, the very first Flying Dutchman. This would have 2 positions, on your back or in the flying position. Stealth would switch off between the 2 during the course, including taking on a vertical loop backwards while on your back, an experience that you couldn't find anywhere else. The Flying Dutchman was more than just an amazing, innovative coaster concept. It was Vekoma's attempt to enter the ongoing coaster war. Intamin and B&M were dominating the industry, and Vekoma was being left behind, quickly finding that their models were outdated. Stealth was their response, but being a technologically advanced coaster, it had lots of issues, and Paramount reportedly scrapped their plans to add 2 more of these for 2001, and these would end up in Six Flags' hands, going to Worlds of Adventure and Six Flags America. And these 3 would be the only ones that would ever be sold. Stealth and the model as a whole were unsuccessful, but it paved the way for the flying model that B&M would make popular starting in 2002. December 19th, 2000. Just 10 months after they opened what had been the world's tallest coaster, Six Flags Magic Mountain dropped what park president Del Holland called a bombshell that's sure to echo throughout the industry. They would be adding 3 new coasters for the 2001 season, bringing their total to 15, setting a new world record. This was a radical time for Six Flags as a whole, but with the theme park competition in Southern California and the ongoing feud they had with Cedar Point to be the best thrill park in the world, the company really outdid themselves with this announcement. Granted, Goliath Jr. was just their old kiddie coaster that had been in storage, but the other 2 were record breakers. Deja Vu was one of 3 giant inverted boomerang prototypes that would be added to Six Flags parks in 2001, but the real showstopper was X, the first aerodynamics 4th dimension coaster that was completely out of this world. These additions would bring about a new marketing campaign for the park, and Six Flags Magic Mountain would now be known as the Extreme Park. In a region with Disney, Knott's, SeaWorld, and Universal, Magic Mountain had embraced their identity as the park that would exclusively focus on thrills, and combined with Six Flags' aggressive investment strategy of the time, we were truly spoiled here in Southern California. May 11th, 1999. Paramount's Kings Island announces their intention to build the successor to their legendary coaster, the Beast. This would be the Son of Beast, the first and still the only wooden coaster to surpass the 200-foot mark. The project was given to the Roller Coaster Corporation of America, and despite opening on time for the 2000 season, this was nothing but trouble from the start. Building a wooden coaster of this magnitude was hard enough, but with the corners that RCCA cut in construction, it actually became dangerous. Paramount was looking up at Cedar Point, opening the world's first 300-foot coaster the same year, and they had to make a splash to keep up. 218 feet was not going to be enough. Son of Beast was also the first modern wooden coaster to feature an inversion, a massive 118-foot vertical loop. Son of Beast suffered two incidents, one in 2006 and one in 2009, and it would close after the 2009 season, never to reopen again, finally demolished after 3 seasons of standing but not operating. Son of Beast pushed the limits of a wooden coaster seemingly too far, but had it been done properly by a better company, it could have worked. Son of Beast would be closed constantly during the 2000 season, and by November, Paramount started filing lawsuits against RCCA and other companies responsible for the materials and construction of the ride. Nobody has tried to build a wooden hypercoaster since, or put a vertical loop on a wooden coaster. But modern wooden coaster companies have been working other inversions into their successful models, and RMC has been around that 200-foot mark, but using their steel lift structure at the highest points. Son of Beast was a one-of-a-kind coaster, and probably the most infamous coaster story of all time. February 11th, 2000. The world's tallest coaster opens up at Six Flags Magic Mountain, a giant among coasters, Goliath, featuring a 255-foot drop. It was lucky that they managed to open this up so early in the season, because they knew that record would not last long. May 13th, 2000. Millennium Force opens as the new world's tallest coaster, and the first coaster to hit the 300-foot mark. Millennium Force would become an icon over the next 2 decades, but it would not be the world record holder for very long. August 1st, 2000. Steel Dragon 2000 debuts at Japan's Nagashima Spaland with a 306-foot drop. The world's tallest coaster had been broken quite a bit over the last few decades, but having it broken 3 times in the span of 6 months was unheard of, and it really exemplifies the height of that coaster war. The most remarkable thing about it is that the record was broken by 3 different manufacturers. Giovanola had only 1 coaster under their belt when they broke the record with Goliath. Intamin had just built their first hypercoaster the year prior, before graduating to the Giga with Millennium Force. And Morgan was popular for building hypers that hung around the 200-foot mark, before surpassing the 300-foot mark with Steel Dragon 2000. Intamin would go on to smash every record in the book over the next decade, but Giovanola and Morgan combined for a grand total of 11 coasters between them. But there they were, right in the middle of the height of the coaster war. Coasters keep innovating, and manage to impress us coaster enthusiasts. But there was nothing like the mad rush of record breakers that we saw in a tiny window of time at the turn of the millennium. That's it for the year 2000. It was really dominated by innovative new rides and massive expansions. Every entry on this list falls into one of these 2 categories. We will never see a year quite like this one ever again. I think a lot of companies, especially Six Flags, regretted their aggressive investments that eventually led to their bankruptcy, but we still get to enjoy the fruits of their bad decisions. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like. That's the best way to show your support for the channel. And if you're not subscribed yet, please consider doing so for more content just like this. If you like this series, check out my playlist. That has the other 3 years that I've done up to this point. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.